Liu Xiaojun has been popped. Now, this might come as a surprise to a lot of people. I know it came as a surprise to me. Not that he was on drugs, but the fact that he got popped and the sort of circumstances surrounding the way that he got popped, or at least, I should say, received an adverse finding. So to fill you in, if you have only just found out about weightlifting, in 2009, Liu Xiaojun won the World Championships. 10 years later, he won again for the 5th time. 2 years after that, he won the Olympic Games for the 3rd time. He is the most well-known weightlifter in the world, I would say at this point. If Weightlifting House publishes any piece of content with any weightlifter, the one with him is the one that is always going to get the most views. So it's clear that there's a voting choice from the general public of weightlifting that Liu Xiaojun is the most interesting person in the world to watch, to learn about, to study, to see compete. And so to find out yesterday that on October 30th he received a positive finding for EPO was surprising. So why is it strange? It's strange for a few reasons. One, why EPO? So for those of you who don't know, EPO is a very common performance enhancing drug to take if you're in aerobic sports, if you're a cyclist, if you're a long distance runner. So EPO basically increases your red blood cell count. Red blood cells hold hemoglobin, hemoglobin carries oxygen, so you increase the oxygen carrying quantity of your blood. So that doesn't seem like the sort of thing that a weightlifter would necessarily need. Normally the drugs that athletes in weightlifting are getting popped for are to do with, well, they're anabolic agents. They increase muscle mass, they speed up recovery. And to some degree there's an increase in the speeding up of recovery that EPO can provide you, but it is minimal, and it really is minimal in a weightlifting sense. There are a few reasons why maybe he would have done this. One, the first thing I thought, the first thing that the person who told me about thought, and the first thing that I saw a lot of you think, was maybe he knew that he was going to go to Bogota, Colombia. He was going to compete there, the elevation was extremely high. We spoke about it a lot on the commentary for this World Weightlifting Championships. Athletes struggled. And when you're at high elevation, you have lower oxygen count. That's why athletes who have to go and compete in aerobic sports, they train at altitude, as the Bulgarian team actually did in preparation for this World Championships. So did the Georgians. Athletes sometimes sleep in hyperbaric chambers to essentially get the same response, elicit the same response as being at altitude. Taking EPO, that's sort of like the third option that an aerobic athlete would have to achieve that high oxygen count. But Liu Xiaojun wasn't competing in Bogota. And I thought to myself, okay, well maybe that was his plan. Maybe he wanted to compete in Bogota, and to make sure that he was fully accustomed to the high altitude, he started taking EPO, and he knew that therefore when he turned up, it wasn't going to be one of the factors that would cause him to potentially not have his best day. And I think that's a possibility, except for the fact that Squat Jerk journalist, who we know works with Liu Xiaojun and some of Team China, has said, whether you believe it or not, and you're welcome to believe it or not, but he said that Liu Xiaojun never actually planned to compete in Bogota for the World Championships. He was always going to turn up as part of the coaching staff. Why he then didn't turn up, I actually don't know. But supposedly the plan wasn't for him to compete. And then the other possibility, and this is something that, when I was talking to Max Zater about this last night, and Max said maybe it was to do with recovery. Maybe it was the sense that he had taken basically a year off competition and he needed to gain his fitness back. Fitness in a weightlifting sense being the ability to train. And the ability to train takes training to get to that amount of ability to train. And EPO doesn't help necessarily, or your ability to sort of take in more oxygen doesn't necessarily make a difference on a repetition to repetition basis, where you're basically just using an ATP PCR shuttle. This is more like a long-term, set to set, morning workout, recovery for evening workout, recovery for the next day, long-term macro sort of solution. But even then, it's very minor. It wouldn't make so much of a difference. So that's one of the weird questions. Why EPO? The second one is, why did he get popped? Now, he got popped because it was there, but that doesn't a lot of athletes we know are using performance enhancing drugs and they don't get caught. And the reason we know this is because at the time that some athletes do get caught, they have been using performance enhancing drugs. It's not like the moment you take something, you get popped. Plenty of athletes use them for 4 years, 8 years, and then we do a retroactive test, we find out, and they lose everything. Ilin, for example. And then you have to assume that there are also a lot of other people who are using who don't ever get caught. And whether that's through clever evasion of testing, whether that's through essentially designer steroids, undetectable steroids, things that at least WADA at this point haven't been able to catch up. You know, I've interviewed Dr. Alex Cagliari-Turner several times now on the podcast, and he's a specialist in WADA anti-doping, and he always just talks about the fact that WADA is constantly developing technologies to just catch up with the drugs. It's a game of cat and mouse. And then, of course, there are other nefarious reasons why athletes don't get caught. There's, as we know from the McLaren report in years past, there's a lot of bribery that went on in weightlifting. There are also just simple, you know, magical or magician-like strategies of put a hole in the wall, reach through, grab the finding, switch it with another one, the old bait and switch. And we know that sports in general have been riddled with this. You know, there's injecting urine into your bladder, clean urine. There's the fake penis thing that, you know, was it Tyson claimed to have used, that sort of thing. So we know that these sorts of things happen. But I think what's surprising with Lou is not an outlier in some sense. He's an outlier in the sense that he's a 3-time Olympic champion, 5-time world champion, incredibly high Sinclair, world record holder and everything. But the thing that is surprising is he's not an outlier within China. You know, Xiaojun had a better Sinclair. For those of you who don't know Sinclair, it's like Wilks in weightlifting. It's a coefficient that allows you to compare athletes across different weight categories. Xiaojun had a higher Sinclair in the last quad. Tian Tao, I believe, had a higher Sinclair in the last quad. Li Fabin was around the same. I can't remember where I saw this. I saw this somewhere on the Instagram. You know, he's not an outlier there, but no one else is getting popped. But he is, and I don't know why he would risk taking something like EP. So, just to be clear, I think he took EPO. It shows it in the finding. He's obviously going to challenge that and make them test the B sample. If the B sample is free of any contamination, I'll take that back. But right now, I'm just going to go off what the ITA, who are the sort of independent drug testers that the IWF pays to carry out drug testing, International Testing Agency. This is what they say. I'm going to go with it. So I think he took it. But I don't know why he would take it. Is it a masking agent? Is it something that is taken in conjunction with other anabolics that can't be caught? I don't know. I find it all very strange that the thing that the hero of so many weightlifters in the world would be caught for is not Winstrol. It's not something like that. It's EPO. This is the Liu Xiaojun barbell statement. I've received the IT's email dated the 20th September, blah, 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 blah. As a senior athlete, I've always strictly abided by the anti-doping policies and regulations of the International Weightlifting Federation, blah, 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 blah. He says, I believe that the value of sports lies in fair play, and I resolutely oppose the use of any prohibited substance or prohibited method and any other kind of cheating, which is also the bottom line I have always set for myself. So he also mentions how it's against his values, all of these sorts of things. So he very much sets it up in a case of, these are my values, I wouldn't go against my values. This is also the rules of the sport, I wouldn't go against that. And also China's testing and feeling towards drugs, I wouldn't go against that. So he sets himself up quite nicely against that. What's interesting though is, in my 24 years of weightlifting, I've competed in numerous major events and have been tested hundreds of times without any ADRV. Since my return from retirement in August of this year, I've received a total of 8 doping control tests in just 4 months. I have to assume that these doping control tests are carried out by the China Anti-Doping Agency. I don't think that would be WADA. And obviously there has to be, in the same way that we're all constantly filled with biases that we pick up throughout our lives and just coming at us, the fact that I'm talking about this is going to bias your opinion on it based on what I say. You have to imagine that Chinese anti-doping agency has some sort of bias, maybe, I don't know. I love weightlifting very much, and as a lifter, I've won all results clean. I have neither any motive nor any reason to use any prohibited substance or prohibited method in the final phase of my beloved weightlifting career. So if you are to assume part A, which is I've done my entire career clean, then the second part of his argument would logically follow. I would have no reason to do that in the later part of my career. But if you don't believe part A, which I think is a reasonable thing to not believe, that actually he has competed for 24 years with some level of exogenous enhancement, then part B does not follow there. So you sort of have to take his word there if you want to take his word. I will cooperate with related organizations for investigation to find out the real cause of the issue and to prove my innocence. So Mohammed Ehab then interestingly comments underneath, you're the best for me, whatever happens. We know that Ehab was popped. He went through that whole thing. His country was banned. And for him to not care, to me, makes it seem like he knows something that I think we all know, that most people are saying, but not everybody will say, about the how clean Liu Xiaojun is. But who knows? We're going to wait for the B sample to come back. It's all just very strange. I mean, it's, you know, if the headline read Liu Xiaojun fails test, winstrol appears in system, or some sort of metabolite that shows that there was some exogenous testosterone or something like that, I would just not be surprised. This is just surprising. It's just bizarre. It's weird. I believe that he was popped for it, but I would like to know the reason why. There has to be a good reason. And the reason isn't Bogota, according to Squat Chat journalist. And so what's the other reason? Is it one of a cocktail? Is it a recovery thing? It's bizarre. It's very bizarre. Let me know what you think. See you guys next time. Also, if you want to know what this is, I didn't plan to make a video. I'm home for Christmas. This is just my house. So, yeah, I won't be here again. I promise.